Okay, I just want to walk briefly through some elements from the second sectional exam just to point out some areas that some of you guys need some work on, give you the right answers, and let you know what's expected of you for these exams. We'll just start off. Obviously, we won't walk through the vocabulary. Either you got it or you didn't. Um, but we'll start with where we started translating. So the first part that we had to translate here, um, I'm not going to read the text to you, but I will walk you through the translation here. Vayomer, and he said, the Lord, to Avram, Abram, not Abraham, you yourself go, lek lakah. I know some of you figured out how to translate this, but you had trouble explaining exactly why you translated it that way in this next question. And he said, the Lord to Abram, you yourself go from your land. See the min preposition here. Eretz, land, with the second masculine singular suffix. So from your land, or the land of you, and from your native land, your kindred. Several different ways you could have translated this, and I got several different translations. Most of you were on the right track, so that's not that big a deal. But as long as you noticed here the Vav conjunction, the min preposition, and the second masculine singular suffix. So, and from your native land, or from your kindred, and from the house of your father. Remember the construct chain here. We have the second masculine singular suffix on father, avi. So that makes this definite, which thus makes this definite. So, and from the house of your father, or your father's house, to the land which, relative pronoun which, I will show you, or I show you. First common singular prefix, aleph here. Second masculine singular suffix, and then the verb is ra'ah, and we'll talk about the missing letter clues that help us to know what that verb is. So, and he said, the Lord to Abram, you yourself go from your land and from your kindred and from your father's house to the land which I will show you. All right. Most of you did okay with this one. Some of you had some issues, but most of you did okay with this one. The next question asks you to describe the aspect of the verb found in the phrase lek lakah and explain the form that it is in. The verb here is lek. This lakah is a reflexive preposition with the second masculine singular suffix. Some of you mentioned that as well. That's fine, but really we're concerned about the verb here. Lek, the form of the verb. It is an imperative masculine singular, and we know that because to get the imperative, remember we take the second masculine singular imperfect and remove the initial element. So the second masculine singular imperfect of halak, which is our root verb, is telek. So if we remove this initial element, remove the tav here, we are left with lake or lek. So that's how we form the imperative, is to take the second masculine singular imperfect and remove the initial element from it. And then we're left with the imperative, lek. All right, the next question asks you to parse areka. It is a hafil imperfect, first common singular, with a second masculine singular suffix. Now, how do we know this? Most of you figured out that there is a prefix here. The aleph is a prefix, and then the kaf here is the second masculine singular suffix. Some of you had trouble determining how to parse this, but you should have parsed it as a first common singular imperfect with a second masculine singular suffix. That's how we parse verbs. Now, how do we know that it's hifil? Well, we can take a look at the prefix here, the aleph prefix with the patak pointing. You ought to know by this point, and if you don't, you can look at your chart on page 73 that deals with the hifil, and you'll see that the hifil is the only stem in which the prefix, normally takes a patak. So because we have the patak under the prefix, then we ought to know that this is a hifil imperfect verb. So it's hifil imperfect, first common singular, because of our first common singular prefix, with a second masculine singular suffix. All right, and we would translate this: I show or I will show you. Okay. So then we move on to our missing letter clues in order to help us determine what the verb root is. We have no dagesh in the resh here, and obviously the resh is a guttural, acts as a guttural, so it doesn't take a dagesh. But if there was going to be a dagesh, we would expect a lengthening of the patak here to a komets, but there is none of that. So we look to the vowel under the prefix. The vowel under the prefix is a patak, and so it indicates a missing final hey. Find that in your missing letter clues. I hope you guys are referring back to those regularly on page 43. I still have that page dog-eared in my textbook, so I would encourage you guys to do the same and keep referring back to that. So we would know then that the root is resh aleph hey, ra'ah, meaning to see, or in the hifil, to show. So I will show you. The next part, we're asked to translate again, and so we'll walk through this translation. Vayahi, and it happened, and it was, however you chose to translate that. You'll note that this is a vav consecutive, so even though it's an imperfect verb form with the prefix, the vav consecutive gives it a perfect or a past tense translation. So, and it happened, or and it was, famine. Ra'av is famine in the land, and we'll get to this element as well. And he went down, Abram, to Egypt. How do we know it's to Egypt? We have the komets hey here, which we'll discuss down here, which is our hey directive. So, and it was famine in the land, and he went down, Abram, to Egypt to sojourn. And obviously my comments is a little out of place there, but it should be directly under the lamed, to sojourn, infinitive construct here, there. So, and it happened, and it was famine in the land, and he went down, Abram, to Egypt to sojourn there. For heavy or severe, I know one of you translated this as great. Typically for the word great, we're going to see the Hebrew word gadol. Kaved, we should translate as severe or heavy. The famine in the land. So, and it was a famine in the land, and he went down, and Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for heavy was the famine in the land. All right. So then we come to Ba'aretz, and the test asked you to parse and explain the pointing of this word. And we see this word occurring twice in our translation, here and here. So when we parse this, it is a feminine singular noun, eretz. Some of you said masculine singular. Some of you didn't even bother to parse the noun. We still parse nouns. Parsing is a little different with nouns than it is with verbs, but you still ought to be parsing, telling me that it's a feminine singular noun or a feminine plural, masculine singular, masculine plural, whatever form it appears in. So this is a feminine singular noun, eretz, plus the inseparable preposition and definite article combination. Now, how do we know that? What is our normal pointing for an inseparable preposition? It's a shava. We don't have a shava here, we have a comments. So that must mean that something different is going on. It's more than just a regular inseparable preposition. So what we have, in fact, is the inseparable preposition plus the definite article, in which the inseparable preposition takes the pointing of the definite article. If you remember, hopefully you remember, the definite article pointing is typically patak, dagesh forte. So patak under the hay, or in this case the bait, and then we'd see a dagesh forte in the next consonant. But because we have an aleph in the next position, the aleph is a guttural which rejects the dagesh, and so the patak that we would normally expect to see here is lengthened to a comments. And so that's why we're left with this pointing. Rather than patak dagesh forte, which would be the typical definite article pointing, we have a comments instead. So this is a feminine singular noun plus the inseparable preposition definite article combination. So in the land is how we would translate this. And you notice that's how I did translate it. A famine in the land. For it was great, it was severe, the famine in the land. All right. So our next question asks us to explain the ending element on mitzrayimah, and we discussed this briefly, but the comments hey, as you hopefully remember, is the hey directive, indicates location, indicates towards something. So we translated it, and he went down, Abram, to Egypt, towards Egypt, however you want to say that, as long as you indicate movement towards Egypt. So this is the hey directive. The next question asks us to parse vayared. Vayared is a cal imperfect third masculine singular with a vav consecutive. So how do we know? Obviously we have the vav conjunction here. We see that it's pointed with a patak and a dagesh forte in the prefix. So patak dagesh forte means vav consecutive. Because we have vav consecutive, we know that this yod here is the prefix and not part of the root, which means we're missing a root consonant, which we'll get to in this next question. So how do we know then that it is a cow? We know it's imperfect. We know it's third masculine singular because this is the third masculine singular prefix. But how do we know that it's cow? Our typical pointing for a prefix, in the cow stem is going to be a shava under the prefix, but because we have we are missing a letter, in particular an initial yod, then we have instead the tsere pointing underneath the prefix. So it's a cow imperfect third masculine singular with a vav consecutive. So then explain the missing letter clues. How do we know that we're missing an initial vav, an initial yod? Obviously the first thing we do is look to see if there is a dagesh in our first root consonant. There is no dagesh in the first root consonant, so we look at the prefix pointing. The tsere here points to an initial missing yod. All right, that's how we know that we're missing a yod, because we have the tsere pointing here. So then our root is yarad, yod resh dalet. Um, Interestingly, this looks a lot like the root, yod resh dalet, but we know that this yod here is the third masculine singular prefix, and not the yod of the root. So just want you to be aware of that. It looks like it's got all of the consonants there, but it doesn't. All right. So then we move on to our next bit of translation. And this was a very short one, but I know it still gave some of you some concerns, some issues, and that's okay. Again, vayahi, again, vav consecutive here, indicating an imperfect with a perfect translation. So, and it happened, and it was. Ka'asher, this is a combination of the relative pronoun asher with the inseparable preposition ki or ka in this instance. Hopefully you've come across this before and you've seen this is the translation for the kaf preposition is typically like or as. So as that, as which, like that. So typically we would translate this as just as. So, and it was just as. Hikriv, he was about to enter into Egypt. Again, we have the hey directive here with the comets hey. So to Egypt, towards Egypt. This is the Hifil perfect 3ms as we parse it in our next next question. Hifil perfect 3ms. We know that because it has the Hifil stem sign and then the Hirik yod here in the middle. So we know that this is a Hifil. We know that it's perfect third masculine singular because it has the hey stem sign and then the Hirik yod in the middle. It's from the word karav. Now, the normal translation for karav is to draw near, to approach. However, when it's in the hifil, it often has this connotation of about to, coming to the point of, and then we see to enter in our next word. So I would translate this as, and it was just as he was about to enter. So this idea of on the verge of doing something, he was about to enter into Egypt. The next question asks us to parse lavo. This is a cal infinitive construct. Most of you had trouble with this one. Remember, when you have an inseparable preposition attached to a verb, most of the time it's going to be a cal infinitive construct. That's something we've covered in the book. I don't remember exactly what the note is now off the top of my head. But you should remember that if you have an inseparable preposition attached to a verbal, as in this instance right here, then it's a cal infinitive construct. So our verb is bo, meaning to enter, to go in. So labo, to enter. So, and it was, and it happened just as he was about to enter into Egypt. All right. So that's how we would translate and parse those words. And then the last bit of translation was for extra credit. Some of you attempted and had some trouble. Some of you didn't even attempt. And that's okay. It was extra credit. Um, but I just want to walk you through the translation so you can see how we get the translation that we get. And my hope is what you guys ought to be doing. Uh, really, these translations ought to be um, repetitive for you because you ought to have been translating all of this material as you're going through the workbook. I hope that you're not just working through the workbook and doing the parsing exercises without translating the text, because that's a big part of what you ought to be doing is translating the text. So I hope that that's what you guys are doing, and so these translations ought to have been familiar to you. Nevertheless, we'll look at the translation for the extra credit. Vahaya. Now, interestingly here, you see this is a perfect verb. There is no prefix, so it is a perfect verb. However, the Vav conjunction here gives it, this acts as what's called a Vav reversive, so that it essentially gives the perfect verb an imperfect translation. It's kind of the opposite of our Vav consecutive, and so it acts in a way to give the perfect verb an imperfect translation. So rather than "and it happened," you could translate this "and it will happen," "and it will be." And as we go through the translation and we see exactly what's being said in this verse, we see how the imperfect translation certainly works out a lot easier. So, and it will happen that they will see. Again, you have the imperfect verb with our third masculine plural prefix, the yod and the shurik at the end. So they will see. You, this is our definite sign of the definite direct object with the second feminine singular suffix. So this is just translated you. So, and it will happen that they will see you. Again, I've got a vowel out of place here. Ha Mitzrim, the Egyptians, is how we would translate this. And they will say, this is our third common plural affix. Again, the Vav conjunction here acts as a Vav reversive. So even though this is a perfect verb with an affix, it functions like an imperfect in its translation. So, and they will say, and then ishto, his wife, his woman. This is isha, obviously with the third masculine singular suffix here, and then we have the hey here that is changed to a tav, ishto, so it's his wife, his woman is this, zot is this, and it will happen that they will see you, the Egyptians, and they will say, his wife is this, or this is his wife, and they will kill me, again, the definite direct object marker with the first common singular suffix. So, and here we have harag, or hargu in this instance, with the Vav reversive. So even though this is a perfect third common plural verb, it's given an imperfect translation because of the Vav reversive. They will kill me, but you, and this is where your translation comes in, and how you choose to translate the Vav conjunction here. It can be translated in a variety of ways. Obviously, the most common is and, But here we have these contrasting ideas. So the best way to translate it in this instance would be but. So, but you, again, sign a definite direct object plus the second feminine singular suffix. They will let live. Yach, you. Uh, Here we have the PL from Chaya, and we discussed this. This was actually in your parsing exercise that we posted a video on yesterday, so we won't really get into that. But it is the PL, third masculine plural. You see the prefix, the yod prefix, and the shurik at the end lets you know that it's the third masculine plural. Imperfect. So third masculine plural prefix. All right, so and it will happen that they will see you, the Egyptians, and they will say, his wife is this, and they will kill me, but you they will let live. All right, so I know, like I said, some of you tried the extra credit. Some of you did okay. Some of you struggled. Some of you didn't even attempt. That's fine. It's extra credit, so you didn't have to attempt it. But I did want to walk through it with you, so you could kind of get an idea of the translation. I hope that you guys are progressing. Some of you have contacted me through the semester and asked for help and guidance, and I hope that I've been able to give it to you. Some of you I haven't really heard from, so I do hope here as we get ready to close out the semester that if you've got any other questions, any comments, any concerns that you'd like to have addressed, that you'd ask, particularly if you're getting ready to move on into intermediate. I really hope that you're getting the hang of translating the Hebrew and parsing. Some of you have not really done what's required as far as parsing. The parsing guide that you have been given should be a lifeline for you. It should tell you how you ought to be parsing. And so if you're not parsing in the same way, then you need to make sure that you change that up so that you can parse in accordance with the parsing guide, because that's what I want to see. And so when it asks you to parse a verb, I expect to see stem, I expect to see aspect, and I expect to see person, gender, and number. If you have a verb consecutive, tell me that. If it's a noun, tell me gender and number. Make sure that you guys are getting all those elements in. So, like I said, if you have any questions, any concerns, any comments, please let me know. Hope you guys have a good Thanksgiving break. Shalom.